The floorboards creak beneath your heavy tread. I'm listening to the things you never said. You're a map of roads that lead to nowhere fast. A ghost of secrets living in the past. I've shed your breath and I've shed your bed, but there's a locked up room inside your head.
All right, everyone, ready? Let's go. Connor had already learned that Grace Bennett could lie. By this point, that was no longer the revelation. The revelation was how many people were willing to help her do it. Because Grace did not build her secret life by herself. She had people, friends who covered for her, friends who answered phones, friends who created reasons for her to be somewhere she was not, friends who could look Graham directly in the eye and calmly reinforce a story they knew was false. And Connor mistook all of that loyalty for proof that Grace was loved. He did not yet understand that sometimes people are not helping you because they believe in your relationship. Sometimes they are helping because chaos has become the only language the friendship knows how to speak. Welcome back to She Loved Me Best in Secret. I'm your host, Ryder Knox. I also have my buddy Rooster here who is going to help me tell this chapter. And tonight, the story stops feeling like two married people sneaking around and starts feeling like an operation. There are cars changing directions, phones being left behind, fake errands, women covering for women, a private investigator following them across North Texas. And Connor, my poor man, is still walking around thinking this is what fighting for love looks like. Now, before we begin, let me say this. If your relationship requires a designated lookout, 3 cover stories, a backup vehicle, and somebody whispering, "I think we lost him," that is not romance. That is a low-budget heist movie. You are no longer dating. You are in Ocean's 11, except nobody has George Clooney's jawline, and the prize at the end is emotional damage. Let's get into Chapter 8.
Yep, let's get into it. All right, after Austin, after the blown tire, after the Lexus exposed more than either of them wanted to admit, Connor and Grace went quiet. At least, they tried to. They changed routines. They shortened conversations. They stopped meeting in familiar places. Grace left her phone behind when she could. Connor drove different routes home. They used parking lots that meant nothing to either of them. A pharmacy in Plano, a grocery store in Allen, a park near a neighborhood where neither of them knew anyone. They treated randomness like protection. But Graham had stopped trusting coincidence. He had already seen enough. A passenger registered in the Lexus. A blown tire too far from home. Changes in Grace's schedule. Fights that began for no reason and ended with her disappearing. A wife who said everything was fine while behaving like nothing was. He did not know the whole truth, but he knew he was being lied to. And when a person knows they are being lied to but cannot prove it, certainty becomes obsession. Graham hired a private investigator. Connor did not know the man's name. He did not know what agency he worked for. He only knew the vehicle. A dark SUV. Ordinary enough to disappear in traffic. Clean enough to look professional. Always far enough behind that Connor could convince himself he was imagining it. At first, he noticed it outside Grace's school, then near the restaurant where they met, then again on the tollway. Same dark body, same headlights, same careful distance. Connor told Grace. She laughed, not because it was funny, because dismissing him had become instinct. "You think everybody is following us," she said. "No, I think that guy is following us." "Connor, there are thousands of black SUVs in Dallas. Not the same one at 3 different places. You're getting paranoid." That word, paranoid. Connor had started hearing it from both sides of Grace's life. Graham was paranoid. Connor was paranoid. Anyone who noticed something was paranoid. Grace was always surrounded by paranoid men. Or maybe men became paranoid after loving Grace Bennett. Connor did not know which version frightened him more.
The first time they knew for certain happened on a Thursday afternoon. Grace had told Graham she was meeting Esme after work. That part was technically true. Esme was there. She waited in her car outside a shopping center while Grace parked the Lexus beside her. Then Grace stepped out carrying her purse and climbed into Esme's passenger seat. From the outside, it looked ordinary. Two friends meeting after school, maybe dinner, maybe shopping, maybe a few drinks. Normal women doing normal things. Except Grace did not stay in Esme's car. Esme drove 3 blocks to the back of a department store. Connor was waiting there. He had parked behind a loading area where the cameras were fewer and the employees had already gone home. Grace climbed out of Esme's car and into Connor's. Esme waved once, then drove away in the opposite direction. Connor watched her taillights disappear. "This is insane," he said. Grace buckled her seatbelt. "She's helping us." "That's what makes it insane." Grace looked at him. "You want to see me, don't you?" Connor did. That answer erased most of his objections. It always did. He pulled out of the lot. For 15 minutes, everything seemed fine. They drove north. Grace relaxed. She put her hand on his thigh and told him she missed him. Connor believed the danger was behind them. Then he checked the mirror. Dark SUV, 3 cars back. He changed lanes. The SUV changed lanes. He exited. The SUV exited. Connor's pulse climbed. "Grace." "What?" "He's there." "Who?" "The SUV." She turned around too quickly. Connor grabbed her arm. "Don't look." "Well, how am I supposed to see it?" "Not like someone who just got told she's being followed." Grace faced forward again. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Then she started laughing. Connor looked at her. "What is funny?" "This." "This is not funny." "I know." She was still smiling. And there it was. One of the first things the audience should understand about Grace Bennett. Fear did not always make her retreat. Sometimes it made her feel alive. The more dangerous the situation became, the more energized she seemed. Connor experienced danger as a threat. Grace experienced danger as evidence that what they had mattered. Some people hear footsteps behind them and run toward safety. Grace heard footsteps and tightened her grip on Connor's hand. "Lose him," she said. Connor stared at her. "What?" "Lose him. This is not a movie." "Then stop driving like somebody's grandfather." Connor took the next exit, then another. He cut through a gas station, crossed 3 lanes, and turned onto a frontage road. The SUV stayed with him. Grace called Esme. "He's following us." Esme did not ask who. She already knew. "Where are you?" Grace gave her the cross streets. "Go toward the mall," Esme said. "I'll meet you in the parking garage." Connor looked at Grace. "No." "What?" "We are not bringing her into this more." "She is already in it." That sentence stayed with Connor. Because Grace was right. Esme was already in it. They all were.
The parking garage was 6 levels of concrete, blind corners, brake lights, and echoing tires. Connor entered through the east side. The SUV followed. He climbed 2 levels, then 3. Grace was on the phone with Esme, directing her like they had rehearsed it. "Come up the west ramp." Connor looked at her. "You've done this before." Grace did not answer. That was answer enough. On the 4th level, Esme appeared in the opposite lane. She slowed. Grace opened the door before Connor fully stopped. "What are you doing?" "Keep going." "Grace, Connor, go." She jumped out, ran behind a row of parked cars, and climbed into Esme's back seat. Connor drove on. The SUV followed him. That was the plan. He would become the target. Grace would disappear. Connor continued to the roof, circled once, then came down the opposite ramp. The SUV stayed behind him. For the next 20 minutes, Connor drove through streets he barely knew, trying to separate himself from the investigator without breaking laws or attracting police. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. His heart pounded. He thought about Serena, his children, his job. What would happen if the investigator approached him? What photographs already existed? What Graham knew? And beneath all of that fear lived another feeling: devotion. Connor believed he was protecting Grace. He did not see himself as a man fleeing accountability. He saw himself as the shield between the woman he loved and the husband she feared. That story allowed him to keep driving.
Esme was the most reliable. She could improvise. She understood Grace without needing full explanations. A text that said, "Call me in 5 minutes," meant create an emergency. A message that said, "Graham may contact you," meant memorize the story. Esme could lie calmly. That mattered. Vicky was different. Vicky enjoyed the game. She liked the secrecy, the excitement, the private jokes. To her, affairs were not necessarily moral crises. They were complicated adult situations that clever people could manage. At least, that was how Connor came to understand her. Brenda brought another kind of experience. She understood what it meant to maintain one life in public while protecting another in private. Grace did not have to explain the emotional mathematics of it. Brenda already knew. Together, these women became more than friends. They became infrastructure. Grace would tell Graham she was staying with Vicky. Vicky would answer if he called. Grace would say she was having drinks with Brenda. Brenda would post a picture later that made it appear Grace had been there. Esme would keep Grace's phone at her house, occasionally moving it between rooms so the location data looked natural. Think about that. Not turning it off. Not leaving it untouched on a counter. Moving it. Because a phone sitting in one place too long might look suspicious. That is not a spontaneous lie. That is planning. That is rehearsal. That is understanding the weakness in someone else's surveillance and designing a performance around it. Connor saw the work, but he did not see Grace. Not clearly. He saw a woman trapped in a marriage, forced to become clever because honesty was unsafe. Grace was not merely reacting to circumstances. She was skilled at creating alternate realities. She knew which friend would lie, which story Graham would question, which detail would make the story believable, which argument would buy her 3 hours, which tears would buy her the night. Connor thought she was learning all of this for him. He did not yet know she had practiced before him. That would come later.
The investigator did not stop. If anything, losing Grace in the garage made him more determined. A week later, Connor noticed the SUV outside his school. That changed everything. Until then, the affair had lived in parking lots, hotel rooms, messages, and borrowed time. Now, it had arrived at work. Connor sat in his truck after dismissal and watched the SUV from across the street. He could not see the driver clearly, just the outline of a man behind the windshield. Connor called Grace. "He's at my school." Silence. Then, "Are you sure?" He almost laughed. "Yes, Grace, I'm sure." "What do you want me to do?" "I want this to stop." "You want us to stop?" "That's not what I said." "It sounds like what you said." There it was. Every practical concern translated into abandonment. Every boundary became rejection. Every moment Connor tried to slow down became evidence he did not love her enough. "I have children here," he said. "My job is here. He can't be sitting outside my school." Grace's voice softened. "I know." "No, you don't." "I do. I could lose everything." "So could I." Connor closed his eyes. That was how the conversation always reset. Their risks became equal. Their pain became shared. And once Grace reminded him she could lose everything too, he felt guilty for protecting himself. "I'm sorry," he said. Grace did not apologize. Instead, she told him she loved him. Connor's anger dissolved. That is one of the quieter forms of manipulation. You do not have to win the argument. You only have to make the other person feel cruel for having it.
The next plan belonged to Vicky. Vicky had a similar build to Grace, not identical, close enough from a distance. The idea was simple. Grace would arrive at Vicky's house in the Lexus. She would stay inside for an hour. Then Vicky would leave wearing Grace's coat, sunglasses, and hat. The investigator would follow Vicky. Grace would leave through the back alley in Brenda's car. Connor did not like the plan, mostly because it sounded like a plan. There was something easier to deny about spontaneous secrecy. Once people started assigning roles, Connor could no longer pretend they were just making the best of impossible circumstances. They were coordinating deception. But Grace was excited. "You worry too much," she told him. "Someone has to. You think I haven't thought this through?" "That is what scares me." Grace paused. "What's that supposed to mean?" Connor should have answered honestly. "It means you are too good at this." Instead, he said, "Nothing." On Saturday, they did it. Grace arrived at Vicky's at 3:12. The SUV appeared at 3:27. At 4:18, Vicky walked out wearing Grace's long coat and oversized sunglasses. She got into her own vehicle and drove toward Dallas. The SUV followed. 5 minutes later, Brenda pulled into the alley behind the house. Grace climbed into the passenger seat, crouched low, and called Connor. "We lost him." Connor was waiting at a pub in Addison, Texas. When Grace arrived, she ran toward him. Not nervous laughter, joy. She threw her arms around his neck. "We did it!" Connor held her. He kissed her. He felt relief rush through him. But beneath that relief, something colder began to move. Because Grace did not say, "We're safe," she said, "We did it," as though they had won. As though Graham was not a human being whose reality had just been manipulated by 4 adults. As though the private investigator was the villain. As though the prize was what? I mean, they were still a secret. But damn, Grace sure did love Connor best in secret.
Grace told Connor that all of this was necessary because Graham was controlling. She said he monitored her, tracked her, questioned everything. She said she could not breathe. Connor believed parts of it because parts of it were true. Graham was tracking her. He had hired someone to follow her. He was checking vehicles and schedules. But Connor could not yet hold 2 truths at the same time. Graham's behavior could be invasive, and Grace could still be lying. Graham could be desperate, and Grace could still be cruel. Grace could feel trapped and still be the person constructing the trap. Connor needed one person to be innocent. He chose Grace. That is what love often does before wisdom arrives. It simplifies people. One becomes wounded. One becomes dangerous. One becomes savior. Connor assigned everyone a role. Grace was the woman in danger. Graham was the threat. Her friends were protectors. Connor was the man trying to rescue her. It made the story easier to survive. Because if Grace was not the victim, then Connor was not rescuing her. He was helping her deceive someone. That version of himself was not one he could look at yet. The closest they came to being caught happened at a hotel near the airport. Grace told Graham she was spending the night with Brenda after a girls' night. Brenda agreed to keep Grace's phone. Vicky posted a picture of 3 drinks. Esme called Graham casually earlier that evening and mentioned Grace was already having fun. 3 women, 3 small pieces of supporting evidence. 1 manufactured truth. Connor arrived at the hotel first. Grace came 40 minutes later in a rideshare so the Lexus would remain at Brenda's house. They entered separately, different doors, different elevators. Connor had never imagined love would require so many logistics. When Grace reached the room, she was breathless. She dropped her bag and kissed him before the door fully closed. For a few hours, the fear disappeared. They talked about the future, a house, holidays, the children eventually understanding, Sunday mornings, the ordinary life Connor wanted so badly. Grace described it with perfect detail. She always could. Grace made promises, big promises. Promises to Connor that they will never know a day without each other. Promises that they will grow old together. She knew how to build a future vivid enough to make the present feel temporary. Then Connor's phone rang. Unknown number. He ignored it. It rang again. Grace looked at him. Answer it. Why? It could be him. That is why I'm not answering. The phone stopped. Then a message appeared. I know where you are. Connor felt the blood drain from his face. Grace took the phone. Her expression did not collapse. It sharpened. Call Esme. What? Call her now. Connor stared at her. Grace was already moving, putting on shoes, gathering her things, checking the window. Grace, what is happening? Call Esme, he called. Esme answered on the first ring. Grace took the phone. If Graham calls, I'm with you. Brenda got sick. We left Vicky's. We're at the emergency room. Connor watched her create the story in real time. No pause, no confusion, no panic. Hospital, sick friend, changed location, emotional urgency, a reason nobody would ask too many questions. Then Grace called Brenda. Start crying if he calls. Connor felt sick. Brenda agreed. Grace turned to Connor. We need to leave separately. He looked at the woman he loved, really looked at her. For one moment, the mask did not fall. That would be too simple. Instead, Connor saw competence. Grace Bennett was calmest when everyone else was losing control. And for the first time, he wondered how many times she had done this before. The thought entered, then love removed it.
Connor was not stupid. Well, maybe a little. We established that already. He noticed things, the speed of Grace's lies, the way her friends knew what to do without long explanations, the ease with which stories became coordinated, the way fear sometimes seemed to excite her, the way she could become the victim, the rescuer, the frightened wife, and the fearless lover depending on which role the moment required. He noticed. But noticing is not the same as accepting. Connor loved Grace too much to interpret the evidence honestly. He saw her ability to deceive Graham and told himself she was surviving. He saw her friends create alibis and called it loyalty. He saw her change stories without blinking and called it intelligence. He saw her manipulate timelines and called it necessity. He saw her become colder under pressure and called it strength. That is how love protects illusion. It renames everything. Control becomes concern. Jealousy becomes passion. Secrecy becomes protection. Manipulation becomes fear. And deception becomes survival. Connor did not know yet that before him there had been other secrets, other men, other stories, and other people asked to cover what should never have needed covering. He did not know he was not the beginning of Grace Bennett's hidden life. He believed he was the reason for it. That made him feel special. The truth would have made him feel interchangeable, and Connor was not ready for that truth. Not yet.
They left the hotel separately. Connor drove south. Grace took a rideshare toward the hospital where Esme was waiting. The investigator followed Connor. For nearly an hour, the dark SUV stayed behind him. Connor drove through Irving, Las Colinas, Carrollton, Addison, highways, service roads, neighborhoods. He made turns without destinations. He watched the fuel gauge drop and the same headlights remain. Eventually, he pulled into a crowded restaurant parking lot. He parked. The SUV parked across the street. Connor sat there gripping the steering wheel. He was exhausted. Not physically, morally. For the first time, the entire weight of what they were doing settled onto him. Graham was searching for his wife. Grace was constructing an emergency room alibi. 3 friends were participating. Everyone's reality depended on everyone else continuing to lie. His phone buzzed. Grace, I'm safe. I love you. Connor read the message. The pressure in his chest eased. That was all it took. 3 words. I love you. They functioned like anesthesia. Connor started the truck. He drove home, and the dark SUV followed him most of the way.
Grace Bennett does not merely lie when cornered. She builds systems. She studies people. She understands what they need to hear. She knows which friend will cover which weakness. She knows how to create enough truth around a lie that the lie becomes difficult to separate from reality. But Connor does not see a dangerous woman. He sees the love of his life doing whatever she has to do to reach him. That is the tragedy. The private investigator did not catch them that night. Graham did not get the proof he wanted. The cover story held. The phones showed the right locations. The friends told the same story. Everybody played their part. They seemed to be fine. Connor was sitting on his couch. Serena was gone. Again. And trust me, before you start feeling bad for Serena, ask yourself, why isn't she figuring anything out? But that's for later. So Connor just finished getting the kids bathed and put down for bed. Serena and him had opposite schedules on purpose. So Connor went to sit down and his phone rang. But it was from an unknown number. He picked it up. He heard Grace on the other end. Her voice sounded shaky. She said, Connor, I'm pregnant.